Moving on now, and the United States has imposed new sanctions on Iran's oil network, targeting individuals and companies based largely in the United Arab Emirates, Hong Kong and China. Washington said these groups helped ship Iranian oil and sell liquefied petroleum gas in violation of existing restrictions. The move, officials said, was aimed at cutting off Iran's funding for its nuclear and missile programs and its support for armed groups across the Middle East. The US has imposed sanctions on nearly 100 individuals, entities and vessels linked to Iran's oil and petrochemical trade. Among them was an independent refinery and a crude oil terminal in China's Shandong province that, according to Washington, received millions of barrels in Iranian oil through sanctioned tankers since 2023. The sanctioned vessels carried large volumes of Iranian crude to Chinese ports in recent months. According to the US government, shipments were part of Iran's so-called shadow fleet, tankers that turn off tracking systems to avoid detection and bypass existing sanctions. The Treasury Department said this was the fourth round of sanctions targeting Chinese refineries that continue to purchase Iranian oil. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the action was meant to quote-unquote degrade Iran's cash flow by dismantling key elements of its energy export machine. These sanctions were being enforced under several executive orders signed by President Donald Trump, including one issued in February directing the US to drive Iran's oil exports down to zero. The US administration said the goal of this maximum pressure campaign was to prevent Tehran from developing nuclear weapons. Over the summer, US and Israeli forces carried out several strikes on Iranian nuclear and military sites. Since January, Washington has sanctioned 166 ships tied to Iran's oil trade. The latest move also targets a second Chinese oil terminal and a fourth independent refinery. The sanctions came as Israel and Hamas agreed to a ceasefire and hostage exchange deal. President Donald Trump told reporters at the White House that Iran had expressed support for that truce and that the US was open to further talks. But he warned that Tehran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Despite these sanctions, Iran's oil exports have continued to rise. A monitoring group, United Against a Nuclear Iran, said that September exports reached about 63 million barrels, worth more than $4 billion, the highest total this year. It added that Iran may be stockpiling sales ahead of the possible return of UN sanctions. China, meanwhile, condemned Washington's move. A spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington said the US was abusing illegal unilateral sanctions and interfering in normal trade between China and Iran. Beijing warned it would take necessary measures to safeguard the rights of Chinese companies. The new sanctions mark another step in Washington's efforts to tighten pressure on Iran's oil trade network. That continues to thrive despite repeated crackdowns.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point.
Well, we've got all three just for you. This is Firstpost Live, a brand new show, your window into what really matters.
Don't miss it.